I don't want a friend. I want my life into waiting to get there, waiting for you. When I'm around, slow dancing in the dark. Don't follow me, you'll end up in my arms. You done made up your mind, I don't need no more signs. Can you give me reasons we should be complete? You should be with him, I can't compete. Looked at me like I was someone else. Oh, what can't you see? I don't wanna slow dance in the dark. Hear my voice and you shutting me out, doing so great, yeah. Used to be the one to hold you when you fall. I don't fuck with your tone, I don't wanna go home. Can it be one night? Can you? Give me reasons we should be complete. You should be with him, I can't compete. Looked at me like I was someone else. You see, I don't wanna slow down in the dark. In the dark. That's Joji, Slow Dancing in the Dark. If you don't know about Joji, you haven't been on the internet enough. And if you don't know about Joji's music career, then that's pretty normal, honestly, because I don't think it's super common to be talked about. There you go, Def Cope. Classic. I love that song. state of mind. You got me in a state of mind. Bleed inside. My periods and cues collide. Spaces high. Will I ever see you with him? How it burns. You in my room, I could have sworn. I sink into my sleep at night. I think about you when I cry. Want you so bad that I might die. Guess that's something over nothing, right? State of mind. I reach you, come and close my eyes. Between them, your legs, my shoulders overwhelmed. I sink into my sleep at night. I think about you when I cry. Want you so bad that I might die. Guess that's something over nothing, right? That's Daniela Andrade, or Andrade. Wet Dreams. This one's pretty familiar. Now and then I think of when we were together. Like when you said you felt so happy you could die. I told myself that you were right for me, but felt so lonely in your company. That was love and it's an ache I still remember. Addicted to a certain kind of sadness, like resignation to the end. Oh, is the end. So when we found that we could not make sense, where you said that we would still be friends, I'll admit that I was glad it was over. But you didn't have to cut me off. Make it can never happen and that we were nothing. I don't even need your love, but you treat me like a stranger and that feels so rough. You didn't have to stoop so low. friends collect your records and then change your number. Guess that I don't need that though. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. Now and then I think of all the times you screwed me over. Have me believing there was always something that I've done. But I don't wanna live that way, reading into every word you say. Said that you could let it go, but I wanna get you hung up on somebody that you used to know. Didn't have to cut me off. Ain't got nothing never happened, and now we were nothing. I don't even need your love, but you treat me like a stranger, and that feels so rough. Didn't have to stoop so low. How do friends collect your records and then change your number? Guess that I don't need that though. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. Hit it for me. Now you're somebody that I used to know. I'm just gonna keep laughing, I'm not gonna lie. Now you're somebody that I used to know. I'm not a fan of the backup vocals. I used to know. That I used to know. I used to know. That I used to know. I'm sorry. Oh man, that shit. I'll be honest, I didn't see that coming. I didn't listen to this before. But yeah, I'm not a fan of the background vocals on that one. He was hitting it like he had something stuck in his throat, and I mean, I know what that's like, but Goatee and Kimbra. I think he literally made one song and then completely disappeared off the face of the earth. Some people live for the fortune. Some people live just for the fame. Some people live for the power, yeah. Some people live just to play games. Some people think that the physical things define what's within. I've been there before. That life's a bore, so full of the superficial. Some people want it all, but I don't want nothing at all. It ain't you, baby, if I got you, baby. Some people want diamond rings, some just want everything. Everything means nothing if I ain't got you, yeah. Some people search for a fountain that promises forever young. Some people need 3 dozen roses, and that's the only way to prove you love them. Some hand me the world on a silver platter. I knew that. And what good would it be everything. Everything means nothing if I ain't got you. Some people want it all, but I don't want nothing at all if it ain't you, baby. If I ain't got you, baby. Some people want diamond rings, some just want everything, but everything means nothing if I ain't got you, yeah. If I ain't got you with me, baby, there's nothing in this whole wide world don't mean a thing if I ain't got you with me, babe. That was If I Ain't Got You by Alicia Keys, and without further ado, hello and welcome everybody to the 6 Pixels Under podcast. I am NS or Nerd Slayer, your host, and yeah, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. For example, I've been playing WoW Season of Discovery. Also, I have a new video coming this month that's going to be a new idea / format. Maybe not like a series that I continue with, because I'm not exactly sure how I would do it as a series, to be honest, but I can even tell you guys what it is because I'm that excited about it. I'm going to do a Star Wars video that's basically every Star Wars game in it. And I'm just going to talk about them. And part of that for me is like an introduction more back into the world of Star Wars and Star Wars games, because it's been a while since I've made anything Star Wars related, despite being a pretty mega fan. And it's a good segue to kind of introduce myself to more Star Wars centric fans that, hey, I make Star Wars content as well. So, yeah, literally I will start with arcade games, standalone games, the series-based games, episode-based games, standalone games. I think I said that already. Everything. And, yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. It's going to be a long video. I'm not going to lie. It's probably going to be over an hour long. I don't think it's even possible I can not have it over an hour long. Even if I just spent like 2 minutes with each game, it would probably still be an hour long. Like, no kidding. You know what I'm saying? Because there's that many Star Wars games. So I'm not going to worry about the length. I'm tired of worrying about length, to be honest, past a point, you know? With Death of a Game, we have to keep producing them like pretty consistently because we're trying to make a living and do them, you know, consistently. People talk about, oh, I want the Death of a Games like they used to be. It's like, you really don't. Like, they used to take me like 1 to 2 months to make. Go back and look at how long it took me in between my videos when I first started them. Guys, it's the whole reason I got an editor like Tom. Yeah, even just listing all of the Star Wars games would take a long time, you're right. But yeah, it's something that I've been passionate about. For people wondering why, besides being a mega fan and wanting to kind of introduce myself into Star Wars fandom again, is I just feel like the Star Wars games don't get enough love, especially the early generation ones, like the first 20 years of them. They were really good. Like the initial Star Wars games were so good, and I think it would help maybe people understand a bit more of mine and many other players' perspectives on why we seem so nostalgic about Star Wars games. It's not just nostalgia. It's these games were actually really good. Like, and I want to prove that by showcasing the many of them, you know? Sure, some of them will be stupid and dumb and funny and bad, but really, like, you think about games like Jedi Outcast and then jumping ahead to Jedi Survivor, and it's like, there wasn't any new generation, right? Like, Like, meaning the only thing new about Outcast, or rather Survivor, Jedi Survivor, the series, is that it has new graphics. But it's basically just like a pared down version of Dark Souls, with the Star Wars paint over it. But if you compare it actually to the mechanics that Outcast and Academy were able to summon, you realize there's no ingenuity there. And that's something that I want to show people as well, that even if you like the new Star Wars games, relax, I'm not attacking your fandom. I'm just trying to show you why someone like me isn't that much of a fan of them. It's because I played the early Star Wars games, and they were really fucking good. Like, I think people don't understand that at one point, LucasArts was not making just Star Wars games. They were making a bunch of other types of games too, but they were putting out nothing but hits. And from one of my sources that I have often gone to for MMO stuff, he had experience with people that worked at LucasArts, and he says that like they were pretty much rock stars, not just in terms of personality, but in terms of like ability. That really was a star-studded pack of developers, and that's why that they've gone on to still make more games today. But like that team, teams at Raven Software, for example, still exist. There's some more teams that were integral in the whole Star Wars story. But really, I think it was like LucasArts Games. Like many people don't even know that they had a games branch. And it wasn't some gimmicky games branch. They were actually really good. They put out good games. So that's going to be the video. I'm excited to talk about that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, I got a couple of things that I just pulled from the internets, as I usually do, to react to. Let me see. I thought this was funny, and maybe we could get some reactions on this. We have how to determine if a game is pay to win or not. And can you enhance your progression with in real life money? If yes, it's pay to win. If no, it's not pay to win. It really is that simple, guys. If you ever find yourself arguing in somebody else's favor, like a publisher or a developer or somebody else, like your friends, because they don't want to admit that something's pay to win, stop yourself for a second and just ask yourself this simple question. Does it actually enhance your progression when you spend in real life money? If the answer is yes, then there is pay to win in the game. For example, this is controversial, but like level boosting is pay to win. Like, I know people have become so normalized with level boosting that they feel like, oh, it's just a normal part of the game. You skip it. It's like, that's literally the definition of pay to win. Like, you pay and you get a brand new character who's leveled up. How is that not pay to win? Like, think about that for a second. If paying to win at the simplest form is paying for power, how is buying a character that's already leveled not buying power? It's literally buying power. Like, my favorite Star Wars game only really existed at the Museum of Science as a demo. Played as a droid. Oh man, that sounds interesting. Any Star Wars games you guys like or don't think are listed anywhere, definitely send them to me. Because I'm literally going to go through all the arcade ones. I've played the majority of the arcade ones. I'm not going to say all of them. I'll probably say I've played at least half of them. I'm looking at the wrong camera. Probably played at least half of them, but my favorite arcade game is the Trilogy Pack. And most people know what that one is because it's the most famous one, in my opinion. The Trilogy Pack came with, well, I think there's actually two versions of it. But it came with when you're on the speeder and you're fighting against stormtroopers with Ewoks as your homies. It came with the one where you're fighting against Darth Vader as Luke Skywalker. And then it came with the one where you're in a flyer and you're trying to go in circles around the AT-ATs. No, AT-STs. No, those are AT-ATs. Sorry, STs are the little ones with the pew, 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 pew. But yeah, anyway. There's another version of that same game which allows for you to do the attack on Naboo or defense of Naboo in your Jedi Starfighter. There's also what's the other one? Damn, what were the other two on that one? Maybe that was a bonus level. No, I think there was two more other ones. Yoda stories. Awesome. Is cosmetics considered progression? As some, it's considered the end game. So that's a really nuanced point, Disco, that I'm not going to just discard, because I actually think that that's very interesting, and I like the way that you're thinking about things, which is that you're right. Some people do see progression as something different altogether. So theoretically, buying a skin, for example, in Guild Wars 2 is pay to win, right? Theoretically. If we're going to take this logic that Disco is presenting here, which I'm not saying is his argument necessarily or their argument necessarily, whatever your gender is, I actually don't care. I think that that's an interesting way to think about it. And clearly there's at least two major games that do that. Final Fantasy XIV is not just about cosmetics, but it definitely views cosmetics in a very high light. But Guild Wars 2 is like the ultimate degree of that. And I think that if you buy skins in Guild Wars 2, in a sense, you kind of, that's kind of pay to win. There's some arguments to be made there, right? That what's considered progression changes given the medium or whatever game it is that you're playing. That's another thing, Des. Actually, I can give you guys an example in Modern Warfare. There's this dark Groot skin. I'm not even kidding. It's a Groot skin, but it's like dark Groot. And you can't even fucking see it half the time, dude. Like, I think they've kind of like nerfed it slightly, but like, it literally, like when you look at it, it would be like a black like outline with like vague like wooden like figures, and it's just like you can't see it. It wasn't very descript. And if you Google it online, a bunch of people are complaining about it. It's tricky, but it's not in the sense that pay to win is okay if you know what you're getting yourself into. I think the problem is that because the developers and publishers have done such a good time or good job kind of poisoning the well, players often get caught in arguing things that they should not even argue. For example, they'll try to like not call something pay to win. For example, when I did my Black Desert Online, why I don't like that video, I had people trying to argue to me that like, oh, having all the things you described, how is that pay to win? It's like, dude, some of these things are literally integral to like how you play the game in terms of convenience. If you want to sit there and act like you're like too dumb to see the connection of how that could be pay to win, that's fine. But don't tell other people to do it. That's always been my problem, is it's okay if I like it, or you want to be dumb about it, or whatever, right? But don't go tell other people, dude, that's not pay to win. It's like, you're lying. It literally is. So like, you're literally like, you're misrepresenting something because you feel differently. And that's actually a good segue into that subject. Is something that people struggle about, especially with my videos, in my opinion, is oftentimes people will try to track down and really nail me down on what my opinion is. And now I respect that if you're interested in hearing from me, you know, and maybe knowing my positions. But where it becomes a bit annoying is that people will do that in my videos or coming from the perspective of my videos. And that's pretty hard to do because the majority of my videos, you know, not considering like editorial stuff, it's not like super opinion based in the perspective that it's like not my opinion. I'm looking at an aggregate review from the audience and critics, and then I'm giving kind of my analysis on it. So there are parts that are clearly my opinion, right? But like the talking about the game itself, often I don't really like introduce my opinion. I'll just highlight the parts that other people are already highlighting. And that's kind of what I do. So sometimes people will ask me, oh, so that means that you like only like these kinds of games, or they'll try to always nail me down instead of just asking me questions. And sadly, another sign that social likability has kind of deteriorated largely, even online, is people are more focused on kind of looking at me from the perspective of my videos, like that's my personality. That's a part of me, that's a part of my art, but you're not always getting my personal perspective. And the reason why that's so important, and I'm spending all this time talking about it, is that's what's important to have as a critic. If you're a critic, if you're a tester, if you're, you know, a consultant, if you do any kind of like periodic work where you have to evaluate and kind of reevaluate things, like you basically don't have a choice but to approach it in that way. Because think about it. If I go into every situation thinking I know everything because I've been playing these games for 20 years and so on and so forth, I'm going to constantly be out of my depth when new things are presented to myself. what I always try to do is keep playing the new games as they come out, so that way I know whatever is new or isn't new and why the games suck or are good. Now, sometimes people will take that as, oh, well, you play these new games, it means that you like love them and so on and so forth. That's not always the case. Sometimes I just want to cover them, for example. And whether that mean I'm playing the game or I did a video on the game. Now, there's a bunch of good examples of this. For example, when I did my video series talking about EverQuest, the EverQuest franchise, some people just like, is bound to happen with my series title in some sense, took it as me being like, oh, the series sucks. It's like, if you actually like watch the video, like EverQuest didn't fail in some like literal sense. Like what I was highlighting was that the franchise has not put out anything new, any new versions of itself in some time, and has been basically putting out small expansions every now and then for the first game and second game. But it's essentially just kind of like become like that still water that's not, stirring anymore. And so I made a video on that, and then it was funny because I saw some people then taking like my perspectives from other PvP videos and being like, oh, it's because Nerd doesn't like PvE, and it's like, wait, what? How is this even connected? And you realize that for some people, instead of actually socializing with you or trying to ask you questions and get to know you better, they'll just kind of take whatever they can get from you, like in my case, my videos, and they'll be like, okay, that's what his opinion is. And it's like, well, I mean, the thing is that you're only getting a fraction of whatever my opinion is. So, for example, I love EverQuest. I love EverQuest 1 specifically. And I even like Project 1999, and I recommended it to people at the end of the video, if you made it that far. Because the thing that I love about EverQuest is not that it's a PvE game. This is like a misunderstanding that a lot of newer age fans have, is they think that old school MMOs were made for like one particular type of player. They weren't. None of them were, actually. And that's because they were trying to build them as worlds. And we were trying to build a world. You can't build a world for just one kind of player. Think about that for a second. If they tried to just build a giant world for only one player, the world becomes populated by one type of player, and it's not sustainable. So, in pretty much every original MMORPG that went by the name, later on or not, that was something that they all had in common. And a point about that too is that, like, for example, when it comes to problem solving, the reason why it's important to be able to take yourself out of your own self, even if you like or dislike certain things, if you're trying to like actually offer good critique, sometimes you can be so incredibly biased if you don't step outside of yourself that like you'll miss very simple things, or you won't offer the most like helpful advice to people who aren't just blinded by fandom in the same way if you were. Another thing, like in my case, since I've been game testing for such a long time and now consulting for about 5 years, what's important for me, since I'm presented with different types of games and ideas all the time, I can't just look at it like, oh, I like this game. And so when people come to me, I'd be like, no, me no like, me only like my game. Do you see how that would be like basically useless as a consultant or a quality assurance person? You see what I'm saying? It would be pretty useless, because it would be like, well, we know you don't want to play it like this specific game, bro, but like we're making this game, so maybe you can help us out. You know what I mean? And it's like, so I have to do that professionally. I have to be able to come in and be like, you know what? Okay, this is like, let me look at this and be like, what is your idea here? What are you trying to accomplish? Now, I wanted to do a funny react. Let me actually mute my camera really quickly. But I wanted to do some funny react segments where we go over some articles and things online. And feel free to always send things in, by the way, guys. This one is an article on Massively Overpowered by Justin Olivetti. End of the year 11, the healthiest live MMOs at the end of 2023. Now, he goes on to basically, like, so one thing I don't like about Justin is that basically you can always see that he's pontificating in his posts. And what I mean is that, like, he always has some type of, like, almost like pre-built excuse for why he can't just nail down what his actual ideas are. And I call that fence sitting. For example, he says, when it comes to making a judgment call about the healthiest MMORPGs on the market at any given time, there's always plenty of rebuttals on hand to denounce such a list. Bro, nobody cares. Like, to be clear, like, as, you know, my opinion, you know, interested in such content, I actually don't care if it hurts your feelings that people disagree with you. Like, that's irrelevant to me. What's relevant to me is the actual information and the topic at hand. So, in my opinion, you should never waste time being like, oh, well, I know people are gonna hate me, but, like, you know, for example. And then scrolling down, it says, I know this is gonna get pushback. There's nothing wrong with getting ahead of pushback. I've done that in my videos too. But these are 11 games that Massively OP considers to be in a good place with their 2023 development and financials, as well as the plans for 2024. Now, the first on the list is, of course, World of Warcraft. Now, this should not be surprising. They just announced a set of multiple expansions. They just had Season of Discovery / Age of Discovery launch, and I've been playing that, and it's really fun and unique, by the way. And mind you, it's like, I'm not trying to say it's reinvented the wheel before, like, the edgy MMO fans that, I get it, you guys exist because we started the genre. But I'm just saying, like, before you guys get all, like, pissed off and think that I've somehow become a shill, like, I know private servers have done this shit for ages, guys. I've said that every single time I've come on to stream. And every time I'm ever asked about this concept. That being said, this is the first time we've seen an official game actually really do this, besides maybe Lord of the Rings Online. Standing Stone has done it before. A couple other people have done something like this before, but largely this has been the domain of private servers. And what I'm saying is like, this has been specifically what private servers have focused on, and what they've done that makes them so unique and so worthwhile is they've basically made plus versions of the modern game or the old classic version of the game and updated it. This is like probably one of the biggest utilities of private servers. So seeing this play out with Hardcore Classic, with Season of Discovery, it's honestly just been pretty surreal for me, because these are things that, like, for people wondering, why do you care so much? You said that you didn't even play WoW until much later on. While that's technically true, I meant officially. I played WoW private servers as early as 2005 or 2006. I can't remember exactly, but like pretty much as soon as they were erected, I was playing on them. And it's because I couldn't afford a double subscription because I was playing for Galaxies at the time, or paying for Galaxies at the time rather, by buying time cards as a kid with the help of my uncle. So yeah, like I had to play WoW on private servers. So that's why this is like kind of a personal story to me, and it's got me excited to see how private servers and the community can further affect MMO development going forward. Imagine if Final Fantasy XIV had a private server. What could come from that? Can you imagine, like, the new things that players would come up with? That's what's crazy about this stuff, is like, you give players like who have just limitless time and all this like interest in this stuff, time to do things, and that's what private servers often are. It's why it's hard for official servers to even compete with them. In fact, like servers like Turtle WoW, for example, have more players than entire WoW servers, which is just insane. By the way, I'm gonna buy a new monitor soon, guys. Sorry, I have to keep like looking at a shit. Yes, the VODs are on my other channel, 6 Pixels Under podcast channel. I don't think so. I think there's a 1.0 Realm Reborn version, or rather pre-Realm Reborn version. I've been sent links about it before, and I've also actually been shown gameplay for it. But I don't actually think it's functioning. It's just kind of cool to be there as like a piece of museum history to teach people that Final Fantasy XIV used to actually be massive, and then it shrunk. But you know, the game wasn't played very much back then, so it's not surprising to me that people don't know that. But anyway, fast forward to the relevant parts of what's on screen. Final Fantasy XIV is definitely one of the best on the list. It deserves to be on this list. Whether I want to argue that it's not really massive or not is irrelevant. The point here being that online RPGs that are successful, 11 of them, Final Fantasy XIV is by far one of the biggest one. Arguably right now, top 2, right? Guild Wars 2. Now, Guild Wars 2 slowed down for a good amount of time, and that was reflected in its financials, which are publicly, presented by NCSoft. But they put out 2 mini expansions, one that I even got an expansion ad for, which was honestly insane. I never thought that I would advertise Guild Wars 2, the game that I went pro in. But End of Dragons and Secrets of the Obscure led to good showings for Guild Wars 2. Now, mind you, things slowed back down. I checked them more recently, but still, it's still at a positive uptick, and it's doing pretty well for a game as old as it is, and a game that honestly didn't have as much content for a very long time. So Guild Wars 2 still is very much around, and still very much a player. As I always say, I think Guild Wars 2 is arguably the best online RPG that is massive. Let your head wrap around that. When we think of Elder Scrolls Online, old dependable is a phrase that comes to mind. I think that's a good way to put it, Justin. I think that Elder Scrolls Online is just kind of doing the consistent push, but something that he doesn't mention here is that it actually did have a pretty drop in population, because it kind of had like a bit of a lukewarm reception for the more recent expansion. But, you know, this is kind of like a bite-sized thread. I don't expect them to go into that much detail about that, but it's pretty relevant. Albion Online, I don't have much to say about it. It works on multiple platforms. It's a simple sandbox game that's basically like EVE Light, so there's no wonder why it works. DC Universe Online being on this list is not entirely surprising. I know for many people watching now, they're like, what the heck? The console audience actually does pretty good. Excuse me. I ate before stream, so that's why I don't eat before. I'm sitting here like digesting and shit. But I'm not gonna sit here and say it's had hefty updates. I can't really confirm any of that. But I will say, out of all of these superhero MMOs, DC Universe is the most modern and probably the most relevant. I know there's classic servers of other games and so on and so forth, but I'm just talking about in terms of what's modern. DC Universe definitely deserves to be mentioned. Now, RuneScape is RuneScape. The reason why I'm saying that and sounding like I'm saying that with like a lot of adoration, it's because they've been doing basically the same formula for like 20 plus years. And that's slowly working towards new features by allowing the community to vote on them and slowly implementing them to make sure they do it with proper feedback and testing so the systems don't just fall apart and they just abandon the systems. Like, when it comes to new system implementation and keeping old relevant, nobody's doing it better than RuneScape. They are like truly one of the most impressive games and franchises to me, even if it's not even a lot of the same original people involved. But RuneScape is just, I love that RuneScape exists because it exists there to tell everybody to shut up and stop talking about business like you know what you're talking about. And what I'm talking about is people trying to say like, oh, well, you need to come out with a bunch of pay-to-win stuff, and you need to actually come out with a bunch of shiny things, and you need to do it this way. It's like, RuneScape's like, no. That's it. No. New World. Alright, let's check this one out. One word, Amazon. As long as the studio believes in New World and continues to prop it up with resources, this is an MMO that's not going to go away. But what is the logic there? Why is it that everybody acts like because Amazon is the one that backs Amazon Game Studios, they have infinite money? You guys remember they canceled 2 games, right? If they had infinite money, why wouldn't they just release them? You can argue, well, it's reputation. Yeah, but reputation also has something to do with how much money you spend. As he says in it, he says, coming from a long way since its eclectic development period and shaky first year, New World's impressed us with its major content release, including this past year's Rise of Angry Earth, including content releases, including this past year's Rise of... It's the only content they've had. The way he makes it sound like it sounds like, oh yeah, there's been lots of releases. There's been 1 year of a release. He even says it himself. It's certainly the most full-featured modern MMO that's currently on. What? No, 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 it isn't. It is not. It is not. If it's full-featured, then why does the crafting break without ever having to actually gather any crafting resources? Why does inflation happen so easily you can never have to buy anything in the game? Why are there no major gold sinks? Why is there two, maybe two, one, but maybe two raids in the entirety of the game a year after they promised they were going to put out PvE content? How is that considered full-featured? Like, to put this into reference, guys, when EQ and games like that came out, they came out with multiple raids. WoW came out with multiple raids. I repeat, WoW came out with multiple raids. Right? You have Molten Core, but like, there's a process to get to Molten Core. And Molten Core isn't just one thing, right? To go through the whole process of Molten Core, technically is kind of like two, right? And then what came out right after Molten Core within 1 to not even 2 years? Like 6 major raids. Like, I think more, maybe quote me on that, guys, but like about 6 more major raids, to put that into context. And WoW was the one that was basically like coming out with this idea after EverQuest had kind of spearheaded everything. New World came out with 0 raids. I repeat, New World came out with 0 raids. It came out with like 2 dungeons. They took an entire year to cook up 1, maybe 2 raids. That's insane to me. Okay. Oops. Okay, check it out. The X-Pack came out in October, and the pop jumped up roughly about triple. That's what I predicted, by the way, if you guys remember the stream. Within 1 month, the pop dropped down to a bit of, a little bit over half. Now, the last 30 days, the highest peak was 39K, but recently, it's only been peaking at 25, which means the numbers are dropping on every single metric. Average players have slowed, that I have to be honest about that, meaning that they're not dropping at as big of a rate before, but the peak players are still dropping at very high rates. Now, why is this? If I didn't know anything about New World, how could I come up with this analysis? Well, here's an X-Pack, right? I don't just look at the X-Pack and be like, okay, X-Pack, I think, what did it add? What systems did it add that are repeatable? What bits of content did it add that are repeatable? Did it expand the new player experience? How much did it add in terms of in-game? Right? And since I know the answers to that, I know it wasn't that much, especially when they teased it even, before it even came out. So all that to say that, like, yeah, this is just, and like their analysis on Massively OP's analysis on New World has been like so completely off base anyway, that this doesn't surprise me. But this does feel like what someone in the comments said, or rather in the chat said, fishing for a sponsorship. Because I know you guys have done sponsored content with them before, but like, I mean, come on, bro. Full featured modern MMO is clown levels of like stupidity. All right, next on the list we have Neverwinter. He makes the claim that Neverwinter's in a healthy spot. But what's interesting about that is that means that he was dumb enough to believe what they said here, which is Cryptic confirms layoffs, claiming that the Star Trek Online and Neverwinter teams aren't affected. They always are. That is never, ever, 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 whenever corporate layoffs happen, believe the statements. There's never any value in believing the statements full face. I'm not saying to just think that they're completely a lie. There's probably some truth there, but like, why does he just like take them for full like face value there? It's like, well, I mean, it does always affect that stuff. And I also wonder why he even calls the game healthy based on what? I mean, it has a consistent population. I don't know if that's healthy necessarily, but I'll give it this. It's very consistent. So that's healthy in a sense. So that one's not too bad. But just the logic is just kind of strange. Black Desert Online. Can't really debate it because it did have a better year than the previous year. But I've mentioned my opinions about Black Desert Online. This is a glorified co-op game, and it sucks. EVE Online being mentioned on here is a bit strange considering I've actually heard a lot of complaints about it. But apparently, according to here, it's had some good it had a good Q3 according here. So I'm not aware of that, I'll be honest, but hey, the more you know. Okay. Should all PvP-centric MMOs offer safer seas servers? For starters, I need to go big picture for this. I want to kill something in your guys' vocab and like discussions. Arthur, I made a whole video on it, buddy. It's called Life of a Game Final Fantasy XIV. And I don't think it was bad at first. I think saying it's bad at first is a very oversimplification of it. They did a bad job of making the game, but I don't think that the game was inherently bad. There was a lot of good ideas, actually, and a lot of cool parts about what the original game was. The problem is that there were a lot of other issues that basically made it to where that didn't matter. But something that I wanted to mention, I think, before is that, so something that we used to use in the lexicon of MMOs and online RPGs and virtual worlds and stuff for a long time has always been PvE-centric and PvP-centric. And it's funny, as I've gotten older, I used to think that these were like very helpful because I'm like, oh yeah, they kind of tell you what to expect. But I've actually thought about it more. And the reality is that, like, the best games are pretty much never just one. They historically have never been. And on top of that, when you talk about a world, maybe this doesn't apply to some online games, but to worlds, if they're only appealing to one type of player, most of the time they don't really work in the same way. Like, there are exceptions, like social MMOs don't need that much conflict because there's a lot of social activity and focus on socialization, right? But look at Ragnarok Online. It had PvP, PvE, socialization. It had everything. Look at Mabinogi, right? I know Maple's Story was a lot more about grinding and socialization, so I wasn't going to use that as an example. Lineage was a PvP-centric MMO, right? According to whatever people define as PvP-centric. But most of what you do in Lineage when you're not PvPing is PvEing. Because you have to grind. It's the whole point of the game. That's a Korean MMO standard, right? So that's where you really kind of like, when people try to say like, oh, these certain terms aren't that helpful, it's like, honestly, you guys should start to evaluate terms that are already being used instead of shitting on new ones that, or old ones that are coming back into lexicon because they matter and always did. But think about that. What's PvE centric about WoW? It's actually one of the easiest games to exploit the PvP systems in. I've actually told this to many developers, and they're always shocked by this. It's like, when I played Classic WoW, it was like the first time I ever played Classic. And when I went through that experience, I was like level 40 killing level 60s, like consistently. It's in my video review if you go watch it. Like, I was actually surprised by that because I was like, oh wow, I thought like people said you can't kill higher levels in this game. It's like, well, because most of them can't. But I know how to play games, so suddenly it's like I'm playing against guys that don't know how to play games. And the levels don't matter that much, right? So there were some things that were definitely like new to me that I was learning about WoW Classic, and the PvP was a big part of it. And for example, one time I went to where you run to go to, I believe, the Molten Core entrance. And it was interesting. I was standing there at the Flight Master waiting. And I thought to myself, oh, you know what? I even said it to my guild in comms. I said, you know what? I want to see, like, can I lock down this Flight Master, like, by myself as a level 60? And sure enough, by myself, I proceeded to kill, maim, or disable everyone who kept landing. And that was shocking to me. You might be thinking, oh, weren't you so proud? No, actually. I was actually let down. Like, that's the thing people don't get about, like, actual player killer type players like me, old school PvPers, is that what's enjoyable is the thrill. There's no thrill in just, like, farming a bunch of PvEers who can't get off the Flight Master. And before people ask, how are you killing them? I was on Grobolus, PvPvE server, or RP PvP server, rather. So PvP was enabled in these areas, but yeah, WoW is one of the easiest games to exploit and actually kill people in spawn. Which is why it's always surprising to me when I just hear people blatantly call it like PvE centric. It's like, if it was more PvE centric, why wouldn't they have done more to prevent that kind of stuff? And you can argue, yeah, but most of that only happens on PvP servers. Actually not true. You can still kill the NPCs on other servers. But yeah, you can argue that the majority of it might happen on servers where PvP is enabled. But again, even then, like, whenever you're playing the PvP part of WoW, unless you're playing the newer versions of Arena that basically give you all the PvP gear you need, you have to raid to get gear, right? And like, for most people listening, you're probably like going like, yeah, isn't that like, most people know this? Dude, this is why I'm calling into question the terms like PvE centric and PvP centric. I don't think they're actually that helpful, even just in terms of describing what they're trying to describe. But the further point that I'm actually trying to make here is that I think that they're very unhelpful in actually understanding world design and how to further optimize whatever parts of a game you might even enjoy. For example, RuneScape, a game that I mentioned that has been successful now for like 20 plus years, has PvP in it. Even on PvE servers, it has PvP. How do they do it? They have something called the wilderness. If you go to this zone, you are going to get flagged, right? And they've changed a lot of the mechanics in some of the zones where like you can flag, but like you can't fully die if you're on a certain kind of server. And like there's a lot of different types of rule sets in RuneScape. But the point that I'm trying to make is that essentially no matter where you go in RuneScape, you can always PvP. Like whether you're going to do like the mini games or wherever else, there's always a way for you to PvP and have conflict. And there's even ways for people to flag on servers that you might be playing on, and you could watch them PvP each other. So the point that I'm trying to make is that RuneScape pretty much always exposes you to conflict, even with other players in some sort of way. And mind you, you can mostly avoid it, but like still, you're pretty much exposed to it. And that's because that's just how worlds work, sadly. Like, for example, if you're in the real world and you don't like player versus player, like maybe you don't want to have to fight for a parking spot, or you don't want to have to fight for a promotion, or you don't want to have to just like fight somebody in the street, right? Like you prefer like playing, surviving your environment, right? Well, the sad truth is that pretty much no matter what, you will always have to compete with another player in some sort of way. Because that's just life, right? In some sort of way, you'll always have to have some sort of competition for something. Even if it's subconscious, right? Like even if you see like the last like Tootsie Roll and you're just like, damn, I really want that Tootsie Roll. And you run over there so the grandma can't get it. Like you kind of PvP'd her, bro. Just saying, But like a lot of people don't see it that way. So that's why it's like when I think of worlds PvP centric, PvE centric, I think of our world and I'm like, well, we have both because you can't not have both. Now that doesn't mean that your game needs to have PvP. To be clear, I'm not trying to say like even games that are more focused on raiding should have PvP everywhere. That's not the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making actually is that even in one of the most casual PvP games ever, recently, we've actually seen the PvP audience grow in that game in a way that nobody ever thought that it would. And I know because I've been listening to people complain about it since Final Fantasy XI, which is PvP in Final Fantasy XIV. If you actually look this up, it's more popular now than it's ever been. And that's funny to think about because it's like, why? Why are you PvP? People eventually found a way to make it work. Eventually enough balance changes happened. They changed enough stuff in PvP. Like, the point that I'm making is that why is it that in a game that is supposed to not be about PvP, you still have PvP and people wanting to PvP? It's because that's just natural human nature. We kind of like to do both things. The problem is that a lot of the time the rule systems aren't enforced enough for us to want to have both of them simultaneously all the time. That's why most of the time when people say a game is PvE centric, really what they're saying is that like in zones PvE is the priority. So maybe that means that PvP is not allowed or is heavily restricted. But even then, it's just like that's a very nuanced thing to kind of say. So I actually just don't like PvE centric and PvP centric as a concept because somebody recently asked me this. Hey, nerd, can you make a PvP centric MMO? Like, is it still possible? Sort of question. And what I said to him was, sorry, I was checking my messages. What did I say before? Damn it. No. It was on the tip of my tongue. And then I read my messages. Got GG'd. Oh, right. Somebody asked me a question. They said, can you or how do you make a PvP-centric MMO? And I thought to myself, and I thought, when you look at a game like EVE Online or RuneScape, do you think that they're considered PvP-centric MMOs? Some people would argue both of them are. Some people would argue EVE Online is. And yet, theoretically, right, in EVE Online, most of the game and time spent is PvEing. It's building up your character. It's grinding. It's making money, right? Because PvPing for the sake of PvPing is almost never profitable unless you know what you're doing. So like this idea that these PvP games are just PvP means you just don't understand why those games work. And that's like the thing that I've been trying to explain to people is like, stop thinking about PvP centric and start thinking about PvP centric with PvE auxiliary systems and social systems that make PvP always better. Better PvE makes, or better PvE makes PvP better. Why? Because PvE is a bigger threat, teaches you how to get ready for players. Because PvE becomes a bigger threat, players have to work together instead of just trying to kill each other, right? Because if PvE is better, then players are more invested in their gear, in their world, and their locations, and the so on and so forth. You see what I'm saying? When PvP is better in a PvE world, it means that now suddenly you can have emergent gameplay, where suddenly a fight breaks out in the middle of a goblin camp, and you have to make the decision to help somebody or run away. And that's happened to me many times because I've played games like that. So yeah, and even then, like games like Darkfall, a game that I played a lot of, had almost no like non-combat things to do in the game that were very well fleshed out, past the point especially. And I think that that's why like I have this stance is like I've played PvP purist games and they always devolve to like just small amounts of players who are totally okay with banging it out with each other. But the sad truth is, and I know this because I'm a martial artist in real life, most people don't like conflict, and not regularly. They don't want to constantly have to fight for their life. Like, you know what I mean? They want to make it fun and have a good time. And so, you know, that's more of the focus of what most people have. So even if people PvP sometimes, they're not trying to like fight for survival a lot of the time, or they don't want to, right? That's why I think that combat roles shouldn't just be for everybody. It should be for certain types of players. So that's why I actually am okay with games having strict guard systems and strict rules against PvP. And this is where my long-winded statement about why people just assume they know what my position is. Actually, as I was just telling one of my clients, my position when it comes to PvP is you must absolutely enforce that shit. Like, this delusion that people have that, oh, all PvPers just want lawless worlds. It's like, no. They might think that, but like in reality, none of them actually would. Because then what's the point in any of it? Nobody's gonna play the game. World doesn't matter. There's no economy. There's no PvE. There's no like other citizens in the world, right? If it's just a den of thieves, it's just a den of thieves. I do think so, Disco. Exactly, Des. That's my issue with Guild Wars 2. As soon as like when I sat there at, you know, PAX and heard them give us, we were in a massive theater. That's how big back then MMOs were, guys. Like to put things into perspective in online RPGs in general, they were in massive theater spaces. Like so we were in this massive theater space and they gave us this big talk. Jonathan Sharp and a couple of other the Colin Johansson I think maybe was there and maybe a couple other. We're like, yeah, we love Dark Age of Camelot. This game's gonna be sick, bro. Like, trust me. Like, we're gonna like do like the Dark Age of Camelot, but like on steroids, basically. And I was like, okay. I mean, that sounds awesome. That is not what we got. We didn't get that. Instead, what we got was a game that took a part of Dark Age of Camelot, sliced it, sliced it, and then put it in their game. That's why it feels so pointless. That's why they will never be able to fix that part of the game. 1 second, by the way, I gotta go. I'm back. So that's why it feels so kind of just like lackluster in Guild Wars 2. Is because they took like a vertical slice of a system, but they didn't include the rest of the game. And that's why I realized like PvP centric doesn't really matter, because Dark Age of Camelot, people could call it a PvP MMO, but like so much of the game was PvE based. And you could avoid the frontier zones, which is where PvP existed, as much as you possibly wanted to, really. So like, it was never as simple as like, you're playing a PvP game. It's like, no. Like, Darkness Falls, the biggest dungeon in the game, was a dungeon for PvE. The difference about why it was also PvP was that in order to capture it, you had to PvP. Once you captured it, you could level on it. Yeah, exactly, Dr. Roginki. Is that if you just want to make a PvP game, you're just making Quake, basically. And like, sorry, but like, who's gonna play that game? It's too hard. It's too aggressive. Like, think about that for a second. If the majority of the time you spend playing a game is like elevated heart rate, scared for your life, that can be fun sometimes, but like all the time, it isn't, honestly. You know? How would I design a PvP competitive system in a cooperative social game? You mean like if the game is more so, like, for example, like Phantasy Star Online? I would just add arena, add battlegrounds, add mini games that are PvP based, and just try to keep things a lot more lighthearted. For example, when you die, silly things happen. When the match ends, it feels fun. I would really try to like blunt a lot of the harshness of like PvP for such an audience, and make it a lot more approachable. That being said, if I'm making a PvP centric game, like a cooperative PvP game, right, or cooperative, you know, game in general, sandbox game, whatever you want to call it, right? The reason why having both PvP and PvE matter, and not having enough of one always fucks up the other one, is because if the PvE in your world is too easy, then there's not enough threat and not enough churning of daily resources, or players have to survive and then have to then use their resources to fight. If they're only using the resources to fight each other, that creates with it so much more problems, because that's not how the world works. Our world doesn't work where people can just like summon endless resources and fight each other. They have to make money to make those resources, right? So there's and have to make those whatever the things are, right? So in a video game, a lot of that stuff can be ignored. And anytime you have like something synonymous with the real world in a online world just seems completely disconnected. Again, people misunderstand this topic a lot. When I mention this, they'll be like, oh, you're trying to say that our world should be, these online games should be real like our world. It's like, no. Okay, I've been playing these games since I was like 7 or 8. And the whole reason I played these games was because they were another world. Like, I was going through child abuse and all kinds of shit. Like, trust me, I didn't want to be in my world. I wanted to be in another world. So that's what got me into these games, was being in another world. So I'm well aware that that's the thing about these games. What people don't understand, though, is that we only have one world. It's our world. Maybe other worlds exist. Maybe parallel realities exist. So on and so forth. We're not conscious of them. We're only conscious of our world, and we study it every single day. Which means that, yes, even if you're making a sci-fi game or a game about fantasy unicorns, you should still be using our world as a guide, right? And so a good example of that is like, if our world made it to where you didn't need to create resources and trade and have economies, and you could only fight each other and you could have infinite resources of that, we would have wiped each other off of the face of the earth already. Like, think about that. Scarcity, resources, having economies and politics, like, wasn't for that stuff, like, we would have all just, like, killed each other and died off. Like, stuff like that needs to exist just because it's what the real world has, maybe in some way, but more so because there's a reason that it exists besides just it's what reality has. It needs to exist because there needs to be syncs that happen besides players just fighting each other. And that goes into my other point that I always mention is that another thing that's lacking in so many of these games, it's why RuneScape does such a good job of this, is that if the only thing you can do in your game is fight, especially fight other players, you're going to get bored of it so quickly. And not just bored, but frustrated. And that's because, like, the truth being is like you're not really made to, as a human being, be exposed to that much conflict. As somebody who, you know, trains like 8-9 times a week martial arts, like, and I've been training martial arts since I was like 4, like, trust me, I know I'm not the well-adjusted one. Like, when I walk around and I sometimes forget that, like, watching fighting all the time is like normal to me, but it's not to other people. That's like the same thing that people, like my friends have that have either served in the war or wars or have enlisted, period, is they have that kind of similar perspective, but from the military perspective, which is like they have a hard time relating to like civilians because they're so combatant focused. What I'm trying to say is like this keeps happening either as a martial artist or as a combatant because it takes changing your mindset and kind of part of your character to be able to be a combatant. And that's why we shouldn't expect everybody to do it. It's like how much soldiers or military personnel in an actual war are like the infantry and the people that are actually like running around shooting. It's like a quarter, maybe a third, which is a very small amount. Think about that. Think about your favorite MMO or like the biggest MMO that you play that has PvP. And like all of your best friends that can't fight had to fight with you. Like I have so many stories like that, guys, where like our town was under attack and my 5 friends who can't fight had to come help me. And like, yeah, that's kind of like something that happened in real life too. But the point that I'm making is like, they weren't combatants. And so like, they weren't specialized and they didn't have tools in the game as a non-combatant to somehow deal with things. So they had to go and basically go to their slaughter and go be killed. You see what I'm, and that's what was happening back in the day when Rome was destroying everybody, is Rome had professional soldiers and everybody else had like farmers and people with sticks and shit. So it's like the difference in like a professional soldier and like a militia is just, it's orders of magnitude different. And that's the problem, is most MMOs, everybody serves as a militia all the time. And that doesn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? I don't really enjoy PvP, but when 99% of your experience is PvE, then PvP happens organically. That's when I personally had the best PvP experiences. Yeah, pretty much for me too. It's why I kind of knew that like I was a bit of an anomaly player growing up, like because I always sought that stuff out. But it was because like for people wondering, is it because you're in martial arts? It's like, or because you are really interested in like military technology? It's like, honestly, no. The answer's so simple. It's because Dark Eden was like one of my first online RPGs ever. And that game is literally 3 factions locked in a holy war against each other. So it's like playing Lineage combined with Diablo. So it's like you level up, you grind, and you do all the Diablo stuff or Path of Exile stuff. And then you had these like wars and proxy wars where suddenly somebody would be like, yo, I'm in dungeon 3, floor 3, and there's a human killing me. And if I'm a high-level vampire, which I was, I'd be like, let me show it. And I'd show up, and I'd be like, where is he? And he's like, oh, he's over here. And I'd run over there, put my darkness down, fight the guy, jump on him, and try to suck his blood, because that's how you get the experience. So that game was just, it taught me as like literally like a 9-year-old kid to just love playing games where PvE and PvP were just always like this together. So when I went out into the wild and I kind of realized it didn't work that way, I was actually surprised. I was like, huh, because that's how like our world works, you know? Like I didn't have a frame of reference for that. But Dark Eden exposed me very early on that it's possible to have both. That's why I was always very stringent and kind of steadfast in that point. Like people have like given me shit and still give me shit. Why do you say that they could coexist? I think that the problem is that we've acted like they can't coexist when we have great examples of them coexisting. And I think that that's part of the problem is we're creating these like unnecessary barriers of Care Bears versus hardcores and like the wolves eat the sheep and shit. It's like yeah, that could be how things go, but it doesn't have to be, right? We can also like give the sheep a fucking bazooka. You know what I'm saying? Suddenly if a sheep has a bazooka, he ain't a sheep anymore. He's super useful. And that's something that Warhammer Online did well with their siege vehicles and siege weapons, is like things like that need to exist for non-combatants to have a way to be relevant. Or just don't make them fight at all. Make them just provide resources by doing supply runs on the map. Maybe that helps give other players a buff. Maybe you allow players to donate crafting resources so it gives your weapons a damage buff. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's ways to involve different types of players into conflict. And how am I aware of this? Well, like my family has a lot of military history, but that has nothing to do with it actually. It actually comes from my martial arts background. And it's because in martial arts, oftentimes you're teaching or with other people that are from all ranges of life. Although I've been a martial artist my whole life, I've largely practiced martial arts with other just regular people and like people that just have a job and train every now and then, and you get what I'm saying? So I actually, from that, and I'm still learning every day, have gotten a lot of experiences of seeing players and being like, or players, see, look at me, the gamer. But seeing like, you know, these practitioners and these martial artists and being like, oh, you don't want to fight. So how can they get you to fight? Does that make sense? This person might want to learn self-defense, but doesn't have any experience fighting. If I go to them, like most of these games do, and say, all right, you want to learn how to fight? Just punch them right in the face. That's what a lot of these PvP experiences are like. Think about that. A lot of, even people in chat who've had bad PvP experiences, doesn't it feel like just getting punched in the mouth, like sucker punched? Well, that's not a good PvP experience in real life either. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, if someone comes up to me, they're like, hey man, teach me how to defend myself. And I'm just like, all right, boom. Never put your hands down. I just like sock him in the face. It's like, he's probably gonna be knocked out, but he's also probably gonna be like, how am I supposed to learn from that? Like, you just like sucker punched me and I wasn't even ready for it, you know? And so like, that's what so many PvP experiences boil down to. And so in martial arts, you have to deal with teaching a grandma martial arts, a mom, a dad, a kid, you know, someone who's never done anything athletic in their life. So that's where some of my perspective on this actually is helpful from martial arts into gaming and online worlds, is that like the same thing applies. Like if you want to get these other types of personalities that aren't like, I'm going to kill everyone in this game, like, and they're like, maybe I'll shoot at people sometimes, like, or the other person who's like, I've never shot at anybody, but I'd like to in a video game, you know, like, these types of players love GTA first off because I think it allows them to test this kind of stuff. But anyway, the point that I'm making is that's why it's so important to have non-combat roles and have ways for players that are non-combatants to fight. And going back, actually, we've had good discussion on GTA before. They recently put out an amazing trailer, by the way. I just have to gas it up. I know trailers are trailers. There wasn't that much actual gameplay shown. Needless to say, that trailer was amazing. Rockstar has pretty much always historically put out good trailers, but like the new GTA trailer was really well done. Nothing about multiplayer was talked about though, which kind of sucks. That being said, why did GTA Online feel like it was lightning in a bottle? Because GTA Online, just like GTA, is simulating a world. Dun, 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 dun. So you can't just dismiss when I say that. Because one of the most popular games, especially for roleplay, even amongst like popular like general streamers, was GTA. Why? Because it simulates the real world. What's the twist? You can do whatever the fuck you want. You can commit crimes. You can run around. You can be a cop. You can run people over. You can skydive out of a plane. You can shoot rockets. You can, do a hit on somebody. You can rob a bank. Like, you can do stuff that you would never do in real life, right? Like, that's the absurdity and fun part of GTA is you can do all of that. And so in an online world, why did it work so well? Because you might be saying, yeah, but everyone had to have a strap. Everyone had to have a gun. That's true, but not everyone was necessarily a hitman. Does that make sense? And I know because I was murdering tons of people in GTA Online. And the previous one, GTA 4 too. With free aim. I've always been a free aim player, so like, needless to say, I've been gunning people in GTA games for forever. And yeah, not everyone is going to be a good shot. Like, in fact, I told the story before when I was playing like a year ago. This guy was harassing players with one of those little fly around like vehicles. I don't remember what it's called, but one of my friends was telling me, "Hey man, be careful, dude. Like, he's gonna harass you. He's gonna like annoy you. Da 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 da." And I was like, okay. The dude flies at me, and I just aimed with my AK and just shot him right in the head, and he died. And he dropped right onto me. And my friend's like, "You got him?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh wow!" Like, he was like so shocked by that. And I at first I was kind of like, "What?" And then I remembered, oh wait, I've been playing GTA, especially like in PvP, for ages. I was playing it before it was GTA Online. So like when I went GTA Online, I thought players were gonna be really good because that was just my expectation. They weren't, and that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that not everyone who played GTA Online was a hitman, was a military fucking, soldier or some shit. A lot of them were just regular players. Shoot at you, try to win a fight, try to run you over, try to race, whatever, right? Or maybe they have certain things that they're really good at, and it's not aiming. You see the point that I'm trying to make? Is that I might be the one who loves to like aim in the game. Like, maybe this other guy has a lot more money than me because he's a better grinder than I am, right? And I would like to have that guy on my team. So that's where these games need to offer all these different types of ways to play the game. For example, if I'm a bad shot, I can be a driver, right? In GTA. So many things like that that make GTA accessible to people, despite seeming like it's almost not accessible because it's about crime and shit. But yeah, I think I want to do a video about this because it's been kind of like something like on my mind for a while, but it's like, I think people have always kind of misunderstood about that. It's like, even though it's only allowed up to 64 players on the servers, GTA Online very much feels like an MMO. And it's because it has a big map. All things are going on. There's simulations going on the map, right? Players have their own lives, economies, worlds, ambitions, can do different missions at different times, don't have to all do them at the same time. Like in GTA 4. A lot to look at that game and be like, wow, this is a real world, And I think that that's part of the magic of why it made so much money and was such a famous game. And I think that they're going to do probably even more with the next one. So that's kind of exciting, but I'm just worried as always about the monetization with their online games because they just always go crazy with monetization. Seriously. So 2 had them, but the problem with 2, and someone described this to me actually as a 1 player, is that in 2 they were more like your side thing, like your tool. Whereas in the first game it was more like your actual role to do that thing. So that's how I had it. Alright, that's how I heard it described. Exactly, Deathcoat. Your first mistake was letting your guard down. Now get back up. You're bleeding on my floor. Dane said, I love Dark Eden, but PvP felt like PvE. LOL was fun. 2 Vamps versus like 10 slaves. So that's a really good point, Dane. And I like that. So Dane is making a point here that people might just discard and be like, what do you mean it feels like PvP or PvE? That's actually exactly what I thought. The first time I ever encountered a vampire, I had no fucking clue it was a real player. No clue. That's genius. That's how games should be designed. I should be considering, is this a player? Is this an NPC? What is that? I'm not sure what this is. That was my experience in Dark Eden. And part of it was because, to be clear, remember, it's factional warfare. So all of you are trying to kill these different zombies and monsters and make money off of them. But there's also different threats throughout the map that are special. And so whenever I encountered vampires for the first time, I thought that they were just a special mob. I didn't know that it was an actual player fighting me. So a little bit of that plausible deniability makes it less like aggressive when I fight against them. But another point that doesn't get talked about enough, which I'm sure Dane is aware of, is like Dark Eden had very good faction systems. And what I mean is not just like, we're green faction, we're blue faction, and we're red faction, which is what most games are doing these days, which is just a horrible, stupid way to look at it. They were actually doing it to where like factions actually mattered. Like the secret world was the same. In these games, the factions actually had things that were unique about them, right? There was for example, playing as a human was a slower grind, but your power spikes, once you got past a point, were just much higher. And it took more resources to level one, but that's the payoff. Other thing, vampires have a very strong early game, but start to fall off in late game, especially in team fights. And ousters were like the hybrid between the two. They're kind of like a mixture of good early game and good late game with some of the weaknesses of both. So yeah, that's another thing too to consider, is that like you had these different factions that weren't just different like, we're the green guys. It's like, no, you spawned in their zone. It's all of you hanging out as homies. And to Dane's point, by the way, past certain zones, you could PK your own faction, but not only was there basically no reason to do it, if you did it, it made your alignment lower. And if your alignment low to red, you drop your items whenever you died. And I know because did it. But yeah, to his point, vamps for some reason were more often likely to kill you out in the wild than like humans. I never got PK'd. There was one human guy that PK'd me. But pretty much most of the time, the reason why factions are so effective when they actually work is that if I was just getting like killed by some like vampire, which has happened so many times, like let's say I'm in fucking like one of the starter zones and I'm just like, damn, I need some help. This I can't deal with this vampire. I just type in the chat, hey man, there's a level, you know, whatever, blah 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 vampire here, and somebody come help me. And when I used to explain this to some of my friends, they'd be like, what, they actually show up? Yeah. And the reason being is not only do they get a benefit from showing up and killing the monsters, it's kind of the point of the game. See what I'm saying? So it's like, I remember just seeing somebody fly in on their chopper and just hopping out and just boom, kill the vampire. He's dead. Or they come in on their other chopper, or their cars. They had the little cars too. Drop a turret, just like start killing all the vampires. Like stuff like that happened all the time, and it was so dynamic that your faction actually protected you. Unfortunately, Des, that is actually a very common thought, as I'm sure you've probably seen. All right, y'all. Get your questions in within the next minute, or I'm just gonna head out, honestly. Just because Wednesday is a good day to stream, but it's also the day that I don't train a lot of the time, so I end up resting. And I could use some resting today. I can tell my body. I also wanted to go to this classic console store, and see if they had any Rock Band stuff. Yeah, Dane, I'm the same way, man. I hated how much hacking just ruined that game for so many people, especially for the Western audience. Anytime the game ever tried to come to the West, it was just like destroyed by hackers because they just didn't understand how much hackers were dedicated to that stuff and like how much they were already embedded into the games. Unfortunately, like Joymax, the Japanese version, was like the best version because it actually had like hack protection. But most of the servers were just getting hacked on speed hacking, level hacking, you name it. And yeah, I'm the same way. Like, as you know, as much as people might think that I'd like to play a game that's all PvP, it's like actually these days, like I lose interest in those faster than I would like a PvE centric game in most cases because at least there's like a cooperative goal that we're working towards. Like, in most of those games, it just feels like you're kind of like fighting stuff, you know? Like, you've been enjoying Dark Age of Camelot Eden Season 2. I think I've heard about Eden and that experience. We actually just talked about Dark Age of Camelot and how like it seems like Guild Wars 2 copied the system, but they like copied just like one vertical slice of it. So that's why it feels so disconnected and shitty in comparison. And, you know, before anybody thinks I'm trying to say like Guild Wars 2 has a worse combat system, relax. It's my favorite combat system, okay? That being said, like the combat system ain't the problem. The problem is the rest of the systems aren't there. So it just becomes musical chairs, basically. Like, are there any incentive systems to deterring hackers? Well, so in the case of Dark Eden, like to be clear, hackers don't ruin every game. Like some games do have really good hacking protection, and some games do have ways to deal with it. The thing with Dark Eden was that it was constantly being handed off to different publishers and different developers, and they didn't always have the best tools of dealing with hackers or know how to deal with them. Because you have to think some of these are smaller companies. They might have the license, but they're not sitting there trying to be like, okay, I have the license, but then like I also know how to like create all this hacking protection or pay all this money for hacking protection. Like that's actually like a hard thing to ask for, especially when you don't know what to look for. So a lot of that stuff is just like literally like knowledge based. It's like developers don't know like how well a game's already been hacked. Comes out in new region. New region already knows how to hack it because of other regions, and they hack it even faster. And so games like Dark Eden were just destroyed by hackers because of that. In terms of deterring hackers, I've actually found a couple of like fun ways that like ironically Dark Age of Camelot and Warhammer also did, which is that they take a board of like shame, and for every player hacked, the hacks or scams or whatever else, they put them on there. And then you get to see kind of, you know, that person's name. And it was like a cool way to deter people from doing stuff like that, and also just like a fun way to have accountability about it at the very least. And I don't see many games do that, if not at all anymore. But Dark Age of Camelot and Warhammer used to do it, and I like that concept. I think keeping stuff like that public and letting people know, hey, we don't tolerate this shit, is the best way to do stuff like that. Me and my friends used to call it Hack Eden. I mean, I can't even argue against that. I got nothing. There's like, I have never seen any more hackers than in Dark Eden, honestly. Like for me, like the most hackers I've ever seen in a game, Dark Eden, Warhammer, no, Darkfall. Um, hmm, yeah, those two games had the most hackers. But both, you know, lower budget games that were essentially not prepared to deal with the level of complexity of attacks and stuff like that. Like for example, Darkfall is like a very client side game. So essentially, if you can hack your client, it's very easy to hack the server versus like vice versa. Harder to hack a server to affect your character. Their server was the opposite way, so it was easy to hack your character to affect the server, and that's why that game had so, you know, much hacking. Also, they didn't have any hacking protection, so another reason the game was hacked. So yeah. It's a shame some games like that got ruined so much by hackers. But at the same time, like, taking that stuff into consideration is part of building a world. It sounds harsh, but that, you know, building worlds is not easy and will teach you harsh lessons. Like, if you don't take care of things from the get-go, it's only going to get worse. So like if Dark Eden was able to like find a way to like deal with some of the issues in the very beginning, they could have potentially been ahead of this. But, you know. Is it really? I did not expect hackers in Guild Wars 2. Interesting. Especially at this age, like with probably how bad players have gotten. Like, yeah, I did not expect hackers in Guild Wars 2 PvP. That's crazy. You'll have to tell me more about that later. But on that note, guys, I'm gonna head out. I'm actually, like I said, I want to go to the classic game store. I've been putting it off and off and off, but I finally got paid, and I really want to go get like a Rock Band or like Guitar Hero game. I'm a sucker for classic games like that. So wish me luck. And also, if I find any other classic Game Boy games, because I have a classic Game Boy as well, I'll show you guys next time on stream. And any other cool knickknacks. Maybe like a cord for my controller because it got ripped by me. But anyway, thank you for stopping by and listening to the podcast, asking me questions and talking with me, and, you know, listening to the music and the different topics that were presented. Like I said, we have the next video coming out. Death of a Game is going to be Overkill's The Walking Dead. Then I want to do that Star Wars video, like I mentioned, and many other things that are cool and unique like that at some point. So thanks for the continued support. I wish you guys the best in the continued holidays, because they're still coming. That's why it's always cracks me up when people get offended by someone saying happy holidays. It's like, I say happy holidays because there's so many of them. Like, especially not just assume that everyone's just one type of background. Anyway, have a good day, everybody, and peace out.